Hi, my name is Jim and I was retired. Personal finance is personal, they tell us. So instead of focusing on the average consumer price index, we need to focus on our personal inflation rate and real strategies to deal with it. So in this video, I'm going to concentrate on the personal side of inflation. Stay tuned. In the past few weeks, I've talked about monetary inflation, and that is the inflationary pressures that are being caused by too much money in the economy. And I've talked about the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and the Personal Consumption Expenditures, PCE index, that the Federal Reserve favors. By either of those measures, inflation is out of control. We will get a new reading of CPI on April 12th, but you can go to the Cleveland Fed, which has a nowcast, and it now indicates that it might read as high as 8.4% year over year when we get that new reading for March. As many people on the internet will tell you, personal finance is personal, and your own personal inflation rate will vary with personal circumstances. Retirees like us don't have the daily commute. If you're commuting, you see some inflation at the pump each week. And truck drivers are getting killed by this. They're independent business people that have to fuel those big trucks. So in this video, I'm going to share some ways that you could take a look at your personal inflation rate. And some are more practical than others.
So the first is to use something like this from the Atlanta Fed. It's called My CPI. And it uses CPI data and then adjusts it for your lifestyle. Let's see how it works. We're a couple. Both over 55, more than 70,000. We own, and we're both college educated. So it says that my CPI is 10.8%, but that's the 1 month annualized percentage change based on February's data. And in fact, if you look down here at the chart, it shows that the year over year inflation is 8.4% versus the 7.9%. This is using your CPI weights versus the average consumer. But your is an average too of those that are couples over 55 who own a home, who are college educated. So is this really accurate? Let's keep looking. The Wall Street Journal had this calculator on its website from about a year ago, and it also uses the CPI data and adapts it based on your personal circumstances. So you can take a look at this and use one of their pre-selects to show older person with medical, parent, children under 5, young adult traveling and eating out. Note, though, that these are all based on the April 2021 CPI data, so it's not up to date. Plus, there's a little funky thing going on here. Suppose I wanted to tell them, I said I eat, and I drink, and I don't go anywhere, and I play games. All of a sudden, eat, drink, and be merry looks like a good inflation fighting strategy, huh?
Problem is that this data is not up to date with the current CPI data. So let's keep looking.
So Christine Benz had an article about a year ago that also looked at the CPI data and adapted it for your circumstances to see how inflation really does affect people in retirement. She noted how inflation is calculated, included a couple different measures, including the proposed CPIE versus the CPIU. And she gave you a little help here on how to calculate your own inflation. There's a spreadsheet that you can download, which I did and brought into numbers, and I'll show that to you now. So this is Christine Benz's little spreadsheet, and it'll ask you to put in some annual amounts here for your spending, and I've roughed in some approximate numbers close to my budget, and that calculates the percent of your total budget. And then take the CPI data for those categories from the latest data, which I've done here. You have to be sure to include, like in housing, make sure you're including your property tax and homeowners insurance. If you've paid off your mortgage, you still have some housing expenses. When you enter all of these numbers in, and by the way this works, it takes that percentage of the current inflation rate against your budget and gives you a personal inflation rate. And then it adds it up. And this says that my personal CPI based on this budget is 4.73%. That got me thinking about whether I could download something and create my own look based on my budget and the CPI data for a more accurate number. So I downloaded Table 1. Now there's a more detailed one I could have downloaded as well, but I took this one as a proxy. This is a little work in progress to see how it works. I streamlined that data here, and then I duplicated that, eliminated some columns, and added my monthly average last year from my budget sheet and my current monthly average based on my budget sheet. And then I looked at the year-over-year percent for each of those categories. This complicated approach does require some work of breaking down your expenses to similar baskets that are in the CPI, and then looking at the year-over-year increase for a monthly average last year versus a monthly average this year. And I've automated some of that with which fields it's going to look at down here in the budget formula for these numbers. And again, some of the numbers I'm not using as I'm not planning a new or used car. Medical commodities are lumped in with my medical services, so I only have one medical number in my budget. I don't smoke. Alcoholic beverages are part of my grocery. But I did the best I can to calculate for my categories in last year's budget and this year's what is the inflation rate, and it came out to 3.9%. But that got me thinking that actually I'm tracking a rough personal inflation rate in my budget. Let me show you here. So if you look right above my budget sheet, and I shared a similar one out on my Google Sheets that you could download, but it already includes a calculation of a personal inflation rate by just looking at the total expenses without federal taxes for 2022 compared to 2021. And this shows you that my rough personal inflation rate is 3.9%.
Now, what to do about inflation? Well, there are all sorts of ideas out there on the internet on how to manage inflation, or as they used to say 50 years ago, how to whip inflation now. Some of them are practical and some of them aren't.
Remember how I told you that economists like to look at core inflation without food and energy? And it's not because they don't drive a car or eat food? Well, I was wrong. Here's an economist from the New School who's suggesting that I take a bus and eat lentils. Look at these suggestions. Obviously, this got a lot of attention on Twitter. A lot of ridicule on this just let them eat lentils movement. There's also, in the article itself, a suggestion, let your pet die. All of this is crazy. The craziest here was don't buy in bulk. Buying in bulk does work. I mentioned before that I do shopping at BJ Warehouse, and I'm starting to buy gas from them at their store as well using my BJ Perks MasterCard. And one Twitter follower, David Folts, suggested that I give you a report on how that works. And so here it is. I should note that as I did this, I realized that I'm actually a BJ Perks Elite member, and I get 5% back on purchases in the warehouse, 2% on dining and other gas stations, 1% on all purchases, and that 10 cents a gallon for buying on credit at the BJ's gas store. But here's a look at what I've done in the last 12 months. So this is not going to include a lot of the gas yet. I bought about $16,000 worth of purchases in the last 12 months. And this is a category summary of what I've put on the card. Groceries would include not only BJ's, but my local ShopRite as well as other stores around the nation as we traveled a little bit. As you note here, I also included charity on this card to earn the points, which I then was able to redeem at the BJ Warehouse. So when you think that I only get that 5% on the purchases within the BJ's and not for all the other shopping, you have to realize that, and you realize that I'm actually averaging about 1.5% back, or 1.46% exactly, with the $240 back on those purchases. As I noted, I don't do all my grocery shopping at BJ's, and in fact, BJ's was about 17% of the activity on this card. ShopRite, my local grocery store, was 31% of the activity, and 52% was all the other spending on this card.
The award dollars were only part of the savings of the BJ membership, though. I also received $582 in savings for buying things on sale at BJ's and $174 back on coupons, generally the manufacturer's coupons, in addition to the BJ's coupon. And I had about $8 in fuel savings. Again, most of 2021 I was paying cash at the pump. It's only the last few weeks that I've been using the BJ gas. So we'll see how that adds up in the coming year. Now, the card membership at the elite level cost $116 a year for the MasterCard and the membership together. As long as you're a member at that level, you get the MasterCard from Comedy Bank. For $116 in costs, I have about $1,004 in savings from shopping at BJ's. So the net savings buying in bulk at BJ's is about $888 in the last 12 months.
David wanted to know how I was investing all of this $888 I'm saving by shopping at BJ's. Well, since it was all spent at BJ's, I guess you could say I'm investing in commodities.
Now, as my pie chart showed, I also shop at ShopRite, and there's no membership to shop at the local grocery store, and they have club savings. So I am checking the unit price of things, BJ's to ShopRite, and I buy where the best deal is. I also have a Visa card that gives me 1% back on all purchases. And I generated about $200 worth of kickback, cash back on that card. Again, both of those cards are paid at the end of each month. And using those small number of cards for most transactions allows me to track expenses. So buy in bulk. Buy lentils if you want. Smart shopping can affect your personal inflation rate. I'll conclude with my standard warning. I am not a professional economist, accountant, financial planner. I have no initials after my name, So take these as entertaining ideas from one educated consumer to another. Always do your own due diligence and seek out a professional if you need one. See you next time.